They said a wrestler's strength began not in the ring, but in the pot. Before dawn, the heya, a sumo stable, was already awake. The floors smelt of rice steam and sandalwood polish. From the training hall came the dull rhythm of body striking straw, thud, breath, thud. In the kitchen next door, broth simmered in an earthen pot the color of old stone. Fat bubbled softly on the surface. The air grew thick with miso and chicken. An apprentice, shoulders still narrow, stirred the stew with both hands. His hair was tied but uneven, his robe dark with sweat from morning practice. Behind him, the senior wrestlers ate in silence, bowls of rice stacked like small white towers. Each swallowed mouthful was another step toward size, toward rank, toward the heavy grace demanded in the ring. They called the dish chanko nabe, a stew of whatever the season offered: carrots, tofu, cabbage, and always chicken. Never beef, never pork. Food that stood on two legs, like the wrestler himself. Outside, rain drummed softly on the tiled roof. Inside, heat and discipline filled the air in equal measure. This was no restaurant kitchen. It was a place where appetite was trained like muscle, and where every bowl carried a lesson: to stand firm, to stay upright, and never fall to all fours. Long before sumo meant sport, it was legend. Japan's oldest chronicles tell of two gods who wrestled for the land itself: Takemikazuchi, the god of thunder and the sword, and Takeminakata, the god of wind and harvest. On the shores of Izumo, they grappled until the thunder god crushed his rival's arm and claimed the islands for heaven. From that victory came a belief that strength and balance could shape a nation's fate. In time, men copied the gods. Wrestling became a Shinto ritual to read the will of the spirits before planting season. Priests watched the bouts, believing that if the wrestler stayed on his feet, the crops would too. If he fell, the harvest would fail. The ring was a sacred ground, bordered by straw and silence, a circle where the earth's fortune rose or fell with each bout. No one entered without bowing first. In those rituals, the body itself became an offering, and so did the meal that sustained it. Strength was holy. To eat well was to honor the divine. Every ladle of broth joined muscle to myth. By the 15th century, sumo had left the shrines and entered the training fields of the samurai. Lords used it to harden soldiers, to measure obedience and endurance. Victory brought prestige, defeat humility. The bow before the match mirrored the bow before one's master. During the turbulent Sengoku age, men like Oda Nobunaga staged great tournaments to display loyalty and might. In 1578, he summoned 300 wrestlers to Mount Azuchi. When the best 23 had fought, he rewarded them not with gold, but with folding fans tipped in gilt, symbols of grace and restraint. Discipline extended beyond the ring. Training began before sunrise: strikes, squats, repetition. Only then came breakfast, bowls of rice and the first pot of chanko nabe. The food filled the void the fighting carved. Eat together, sweat together, sleep on the same mats. Such was the rule. Centuries later, when the swords were sheathed and peace settled over Edo, that warrior discipline remained, but the ring turned from battlefield to theater. During the long peace of the Edo period, sumo became Japan's spectacle.
Wrestlers were now celebrities, giants draped in silk aprons, adored for their composure as much as their size. Among them rose Raiden Tameimon, 6'6" in an age when most men barely reached 5. His calm was legend, his appetite even more so. Crowds came to see him bow before each bout, palms open to show he carried no weapon. Strength had become ceremony. Outside the ring, the Heian kitchens worked endlessly. Each stable guarded its own version of chanko nabe, chicken stock, fried tofu, shirataki noodles made from the konjac yam. Recipes were secrets, passed from elder to apprentice like sacred texts. The stew was simple, yet the act of sharing it bound them tighter than victory. When the final bowl was emptied, they thanked the cook and the gods alike. To rise from the meal satisfied but not sluggish was the mark of a man in harmony, balanced like the ring itself. Superstition seeped into every corner of the Heian. Before tournaments, wrestlers avoided beef and pork. Animals that crawled or knelt were omens of defeat. Only those that stood upright brought fortune. To eat chicken was to train the body to remain upright, to mirror its meal. Meals began with quiet gratitude, bowls held close to their chest. Conversation was minimal. Chewing was its own meditation. The youngest men cooked and served, learning humility one ladle at a time. They washed the pots last and ate what remained. The hierarchy preserved even at the table. Outside observers found it strange, but within the stables the logic was clear. To stay on 2 feet in the ring, one must live as one stood. The rule was less about diet than about discipline. Every superstition, every bite carried a moral weight. The line between faith and habit blurred until they were the same. What outsiders called ritual, the wrestlers simply called life. By the late 19th century, Japan's wrestlers had become curiosities to foreigners. In 1895, Scottish engineer William Kinnaman Burton wrote of dining among them. "Never," he said, "have I seen men eat with such good humour and such capacity." He called them kindly lumps of humanity, amazed that so much food could vanish without disorder or drunkenness. Burton's letters painted the first Western portrait of chanko nabe, huge pots bubbling over charcoal, wrestlers seated in a circle, bowls refilled again and again. 10 bowls of rice per man, and yet decorum never broken. To foreign eyes it seemed contradiction, indulgence wrapped in restraint. But to Japan it was balance. The same hands that struck with fury bowed in respect. The same meal that filled the belly also fed the soul. When peace and modernity blurred the old samurai lines, retired wrestlers opened small eateries across Tokyo. They cooked the same stew they had known in the stables, feeding laborers and office clerks instead of champions. In 1937, one such man opened Chanko Kawasaki, the first restaurant to bear the name officially. Its recipe, chicken, tofu, cabbage, was said to honor the code of the ring, nourishment through humility. Soon, chanko nabe was not just for wrestlers. Families ate it on winter nights, steam fogging the windows. The stew had left the doyo but kept its meaning. Stand tall, eat well, respect the bowl. Even now, in Tokyo's Ryogoku district, the smell drifts from restaurant doors onto narrow streets lined with stable banners. Inside, customers sit around low pots, watching broth thicken and meat turn golden. Some know the legend, most simply enjoy the warmth. But whether they realize it or not, they're tasting a ritual that once defined luck and discipline. When the day's matches end and the crowds go home, the ring is swept clean. Sand is leveled, ropes brushed free of dust. Only the faint scent of sweat and incense remains. In the kitchens, another pot begins to boil. Young wrestlers gather their bowls, older ones correct their stance, and for a moment the centuries fold together. Gods, samurai, and athletes, sharing the same silence before the first bite. Strength in sumo is not only measured by force, but by balance, of mind, of body, of hunger. And balance, like flavor, is learned slowly. The steam that rises from a pot of chanko nabe carries more than scent. It carries memory of discipline that outlived war, of superstition turned to custom, of food that taught a nation to stand on its own 2 feet. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echo of practice beyond the sliding doors, the thud of feet, the soft clap of palms, and the quiet breath before impact. Then the ladle dips once more. The broth thickens, the room fills with warmth, and the old truth returns. Strength begins not in the ring, but in the pot.